Okay, everybody, today we're going to take our next step with the French Revolution, the French Revolution Part Deux, which is French for Part Two. And we're going to focus on the revolution itself. The French Revolution is really broken into several parts. You have this whole period beforehand, which leads to it. Then you actually have the revolution, and within the revolution, there are different parts. You have the early parts of the radicals, then the directory, and then finally the age of Napoleon, which we'll get to as we go along. Okay, so because of the economic crisis that was we talked about in the last video, and the Robespierre video we watched in class also goes into, Louis the 16th calls the meeting of the States General in spring of 1789 at Versailles. Here's the structure, and I've gone over this. We'll go over this in class. You have the first estate, clergy; second estate, aristocracy; third estate is everybody else. Clergy's 1% of the population, aristocracy's 2%, everybody else is 97%. The third estate gets 600 more representatives, or 300 more representatives, or the same amount as the first two estates, but everybody gets one vote. It's kind of a group voting thing. Okay? Every issue, the groups vote together. Clergy and nobility are usually on the same page on everything because their interests align and they're closely aligned with the king. Therefore, everybody else, the 97%, are usually outvoted 2-1 on every issue. Got a political cartoon here. So what I want you to just take a second to do, so just pause the video when I'm done talking here. What is the cartoon saying about the role of the third estate? Okay, and I've labeled it up for you. The clergy is the guy in front. The second estate is the guy with the big hat. And the third estate is the guy whose back they're sitting on. Write down what you think it's saying about the role of the third estate. Okay. Revolution has several stages. We're going to focus on the early stages. Okay. Begins in 1789 as Louis calls the Estates General, made up of representatives of all three estates. Out of that grows the National Assembly because the third estate shows up and they decide that we're just tired of being trod on, and they declare themselves a National Assembly separate from the Estates General, and they vow to write a new constitution. Right around this time, you have bread riots going on, and people are already upset. They storm the prison called the Bastille in central Paris, where many of the prisoners of the state, people that were just locked up with no charges, reside. July 14, 1789 becomes known as Bastille Day. It's celebrated as a holiday in France and elsewhere around the world. Fighting breaks out in the city and countryside, and in a period known as the Great Fear, peasants begin to attack their nobles, and they destroy their homes. Okay? The moderates take power, working with the king, who has become frightened by the chaos. He decides to authorize the National Assembly and say they can begin reform. So the first thing they do is they abolish the privileges of the first and second estates, and they adopt the Declaration of Rights of Man and the Citizen. Based partly on the Declaration of Independence, contain many Enlightenment ideas. Here's just a quick summary, okay? Written in 1789, again, uses the U.S. Declaration of Independence, states everybody has natural rights, says it's government's job to protect those rights, guarantees equality for all male citizens, sorry ladies, and states that people are free to practice their own religion, thus trying to end the Catholic-Protestant strife that's been going on. Promises to tax everybody according to how much they can afford, which you remember, the first and second estates prior to this pay no taxes. It's all on the poor and the less wealthy. Okay. They establish a limited monarchy as part of this constitution. Declares again, people have natural rights, government's job to protect it. It also puts the church under state control. Many of the other kings of Europe decide they get really nervous about this because they certainly don't want it to happen in their country. And in 1792, France declares war on Austria, Prussia, Great Britain, and several other countries. And if you know your French geography, France is kind of now surrounded. Okay. The war goes badly, and radicals take control of the assembly, ending the monarchy. They basically fire the king, they throw him in jail, and they declare France a republic. And their slogan, liberty, equality, and fraternity, is symbolized in their flag, which is known as the tricolor. People go around with these on their hats. little what they call a cockade, which is like a little ribbon on your hat to identify that you are a citizen, you are a revolutionary. Okay. 1793, Louis and his wife Marie Antoinette are executed for treason. The events that follow are known as the Reign of Terror, and that was the real focus of the video we watched in class with Robespierre. Okay, kills tens of thousands of people. The guillotine truly becomes a symbol of this period, and you'll get a really good feel for it as you read Tale of Two Cities with Mrs. Patterson. I'm assuming we're picking up that shortly. Okay, so within a year, the violence turns against itself. So by 1794, almost 95, Robespierre himself is executed, as was detailed in the video in class. Okay, the moderates come back to power. Beginning in 1795, a five-man directory supported by a legislator holds power in France. Government is weak and ineffective. You begin to have a return of bread riots and things like that. And eventually, a dynamic military leader would emerge. His name is Napoleon Bonaparte. And he will be the subject of the next video. But let's kind of just review some effects or results of the French Revolution. So you have the actual French Revolution. We will be then moving into the age of Napoleon after that. Lasts for 10 years, 1789 to 1799. Felt throughout Europe. Advances the cause of liberty. France now has a constitution that guarantees rights and serves as an example for the rest of Europe. And it begins a very slow decline of absolute monarchy and monarchy in general in Europe that takes over 100 years to finish off. It takes till World War II and begins in 1914 to finish these people off. The nobility loses their privileges. The middle class gains privileges. Their talent and ambition become much more important than noble birth, and it introduces the concept of modern warfare. War now becomes a national affair, country against country. Revolution gives birth to nationalism. People feel like they have a true stake in their country. And the French Revolution, most importantly, gives birth to Napoleon Bonaparte, who will be the dominant man on the stage beginning in the late 1790s and on the world stage for over 20 years. And the effects of his rule, his wars, will last long beyond that. So, complete the Google form on Google Classroom and submit it, and we'll catch up next time.